Hello and welcome to another episode of Uddering Engineers. By now, a full year of online learning has passed, and I feel like I've just taken my first real breath after, say, 15 long months. And it's probably also the right time to take a break and to reflect on what has kept us motivated through all this. Just ask, why are we still here? I think I think it says a lot about our culture that we pride ourselves through metaphors of running. How we're told like life is a race, and if you don't run, you'll get left behind, or we're told to go chase our passions. But forgetting passions, I feel like I just struggle so much with trying to outpace my own self-doubt and my own pessimism. So, especially when we're all disconnected and studying mainly by ourselves, where can we get a sense of fulfillment? How do we know that we're on the right track? What does it mean to take it easy? Can we take it easy? And these are basically all of the questions that we'd like to ask in this episode, but we do know that it will take us years and years to finally answer. And even with just this discussion, it took us so long to come up with some kind of format, but we're very excited with what we have, and we have decided to experiment a little.
I am also very excited to be recording this episode because we were able to converse with four other students to get them to reflect on their own journeys and also to get them to look back upon the past year and a half. Like Agam has previously mentioned, this episode is a little bit different because parts of it are pre-recorded and not really in the format that we are accustomed to. To kick this episode off, we will begin by giving you, listeners, a little bit of a background on our interviewees by reconnecting with their initial sense of motivation, the reasons that they decided to join engineering.
Yeah, and I think it's very helpful to start tracing our evolution from there, because I know personally I really ran into this degree with so much excitement and so much optimism. And I always have to recenter myself back to this after finishing some classes. So the first guest that we interviewed, his name is Max, and he is an incoming third year mechanical engineering student. He also has a minor in biomed. And basically, we began our conversation with him by asking, why did you choose engineering?
Yeah, so my path to engineering, I'd say, started back in grade four. That's where we had an individual from SATE come in and teach us a little bit about the basics of circuits. And that's probably where my interest in engineering sparked, mainly because it was a good way of, an interesting way of manipulating systems. And then from there, slowly, I kind of grew into mechanical and programming a little bit. By the time I was in high school, I started doing quite a bit of trades and considered doing trades or going into trades. However, I felt like it would be more in my interest to continue with engineering.
So the reason why Max chose engineering over a career in the trades was because mainly of health reasons, but it was very interesting to hear about his introduction to circuits and to programming. And because we know that this isn't really an experience that's shared by everyone in engineering, we decided to interview another student, Lisa, to speak about her path to engineering. Now, she's a third year student, but she studies electrical engineering and has a computer minor. And this was her response to the same question.
I guess like my path to engineering um, is like I didn't really know that I wanted to go into engineering. Even in high school, I kind of was not really interested in that or didn't really know much about it. I guess I had like an older sister who had done chemical engineering before, and I kind of saw her experience through, I guess, chemical engineering, and I don't think I really thought of the other disciplines that engineering had to offer because that was the one that she chose, and I saw her experience through that. And then I guess I also ended up seeing my other friends' experiences with engineering. I have friends who are in like third year or just completed their third year and are in internship year, and I saw how engineering was for them, what it was about, because they all took very different disciplines. Some of them took went into mechanical engineering, others went into civil, one even went into like geomatics engineering. So I got to ask them a lot of questions about that, their experience, what it was like, and I think I got a lot of different perspectives, and through that I was able to see, wow, this is cool, and I can totally see myself doing something like this as well.
I think at the very least, it takes us some time to start seeing ourselves in a specific discipline. And when we're just about to graduate high school, the decision of picking a career seems so significant. Like the choice that you make is a choice that you're going to have to live with forever. And while Max and Lisa, they both took very different paths to engineering, their sense of motivation really came from seeing role models and having mentors that basically showed them that, you know what, they can actually do something in this career.
Just going off of that point, I think the difficulty in this is that engineering is just so different from the outside looking in, especially when you have really strong expectations coming in. For one, I think we all have different likes and dislikes, right? Which makes it very difficult to internalize other people's experiences. So it really makes it difficult to both compare our experiences with others and even ourselves, because for most people, the aspect of personal growth is really significant. We all grow throughout our degree, which can make it really difficult to see where we end up, but also see where we want to end up. Goals and aspirations may change. The things we thought we are going to enjoy tremendously might not turn out to be that way, might just turn out to be something you tolerate. And some other things that you thought you'd hate might not turn out to be so bad after all. As an example, in my first year, I really thought that I was going to hate Eng 233, but it ended up being one of the courses that I enjoyed the most.
Mm, yeah, yeah, same. I know I had a lot of anxiety around coding as well, but being with Moshe or it was the process of like finishing some kind of project that actually gave me quite a lot of confidence as well. But as you were saying before, like this pandemic, this past year has been very hard because it's just difficult to reconnect with our own passions or find ourselves with our original expectations.
Yes, I would have to agree with that. I totally saw myself through the same struggle. And this is the reason that we asked Lisa to talk about her experiences, to talk about what engineering courses have been like for her, including what it had been like for the past few semesters with COVID.
Last year was a really unique situation where the course layout was kind of different, and the workload was definitely, I felt like it was a lot. And, to me, like, it felt like each lecture of the course was, something that I had to do and not something that I necessarily wanted to do. It was like a to-do list. So it wasn't that it wasn't interesting, but I think it was also challenging the way it was presented and like the format that it was given to, I guess, students. And I know that some of my friends during that course didn't really like some of the longer lectures or the recorded lectures, and they found that it was just a lot of content within a short amount of time.
This past year was, I think, very humbling in that it destroyed much of our collective expectations as students, of working on projects together, volunteering in person, and traveling. And I think that also amps up the day-to-day struggle of learning. This idea that after doing a task for more than a few times, it really becomes boring and mundane, making it much harder to appreciate and see the reason behind why we are even doing it in the first place. For many of us, those reasons were once rooted in passion. And during isolation and studying by myself in a tiny room, I had to find a way to break out of this monotonous prison that I created for myself, both mentally and physically. And I had to find this idea back, a promise of newness, so that I don't completely just drop the ball. this idea of promise of newness was something that I had to revisit through my English class this spring in the context of the novel Frankenstein. I had to write an essay on this article on the bitterness of technical sweetness, which was this idea that it is really, really easy to only just see the negative aspects of a project or an endeavor after you no longer find it new and exciting.
Mm. Yeah, see, I never thought I would relate to Dr. Frankenstein that much, but just those words that you used, losing the promise of newness, I think that was very hard hitting because like sometimes I get so excited of doing something that I don't really contemplate whether or not I really want to commit to it. And this idea of just burying yourself in work to forget what's actually going on was something that we brought up in our interview with Max, and this was his experience with it.
I have quite a few friends who want to get involved in something and then they kind of back away once they actually have the opportunity. So to me, I would probably say that if you get an opportunity, you should definitely try to commit. And then if you end up not liking it or if you aren't fully convinced, then you might be able to kind of use that as a way to get closer to your goal. Or, I mean, if you really, really don't like it, then I guess you can just totally diverge and go to another area.
What Max mentions is one problem, but one other, I think, big reason that people back out of opportunities is because they don't think that they are good at it right away. I read that this author, Malcolm Gladwell, popularized the 10,000 hours rule. The idea that you need to put in at least 10,000 hours at something to be decent at it. And while even the exact numbers of hours is still debated, most researchers do agree that there is some sort of learning curve associated with performing any new task. For myself, this was a helpful reminder when I feel those insecurities. And I think also that a good reminder for us all, and that we should all keep pursuing what we want to, even if we're not very good at it just yet.
It's totally understandable because we conquer the learning curve in our own times. But it feels like having to work through it, especially in the eyes of the public, like this performance element really ends up being a little demotivating. And one of the things that I've observed is that everyone in engineering is very, very motivated. Like all of my friends are doing something, and even the people that I have not yet had the pleasure of meeting, I'm sure they've got their hands in something as well. And just to sort of demonstrate this point, for example, our third interviewee, Mithil, he has tons and tons of commitments. He is in civil engineering, but he really, really loves project management, almost to the extent where we had to ask him, what is it like to be so involved?
I like to do the behind the scene kind of stuff. Like I like to. It's not like I like to lead or anything, but I like to. I have visions that I want to bring out, and there's no better person to bring out a vision than the person himself who has it, right? So if I were to tell someone to do this, they would definitely screw it up. That's the truth, because I'm not the best at being like do this exactly. So if it was like kind of like my vision, I like to. I lead in a way that makes everyone comfortable and like this way, but I like to bring it out because whoever has the idea is the best person to use. And I like to do like everything, like not just like a specific task, but I like to be involved in everything. So that's why I like project management. That's pretty much why.
Jumping on from this point of doing everything, I was speaking with high school students the other day, and there's this question that they often ask me. What is competition like in engineering or in university in general? And in attempting to answer those questions, I realized that there isn't really a competition, I think, that really holds you back. Or maybe I'm fortunate in that way, but I don't really know anyone who will go out of their way to screw me over or even have that experience. of overt discrimination. I think the kind of competition that does exist is more inspirational. You see someone working on something cool and that you're drawn to, and that you want to have the kind of drive that this person has, or even replicate it. But I find that it is really hard to do simply because of the difference in goals and motivation.
Everyone, just like you said, is trying to find some kind of niche. And if you don't know what you personally want, you're never going to understand why your peers are so motivated. Like Mithil, for example, he has so much energy and so much enthusiasm. And I know that when I was younger, a lot of my motivation just came from working with people like him. But unfortunately, it also sort of took on a very insecure nature where I used to look outwards at like the busy mass and think about all of the work that I should be doing, right? It was like taking on just average commitments because I felt like I had to be busy or like I had to catch up. And with all of this pressure to start building a career, to cross milestones that make you proud or make your parents proud, I think having so much agency over your future is overwhelming. It's overwhelming to the point where we sort of forget about this process of self-determination, right? Where you sort of sit down and you think about your own values, and through trial and error, it really shapes you into becoming a more confident and optimistic being. Just so much power comes from knowing what you can sacrifice, but then also what you want to be working towards. And for me personally, I think one of the things that I can sacrifice are my grades. So we spoke to, and this is our final interviewee, but we spoke to an incoming fourth year student named Jeel, and he's in mechanical engineering with a business minor. And we asked him, what motivates you in engineering?
Motivation is definitely a skill that takes a long time to develop, because I think the main reason that motivation is so hard in university is because, for me at least, like the high school experience where like grade 10 to 12, I was really pushing, like my motivation was just to get good grades, right? Because that's all that mattered to me, like getting into university with those good grades. As soon as I entered university, I think that completely changed. Like first year, I was really trying to get good grades, but it really wasn't working for me because I'd be going into these classes and I'd be getting good grades, but it didn't really have a meaning to me, right? Like why should I be getting good grades? That's the question I constantly ask myself.
So Jeel was emphasizing this point that we're here because we want to learn, not because we want to study. But this past year was hard, mainly because we didn't get to engage in some collective conversation that said, hey, look, we made it. And when it comes to tracking your progress, if you don't have your peers around, or if you're not actively speaking with your mentors or your professors, I feel like we're just left with grades as a sense of validation or as like some kind of indication that we're on the right track. And, when you're left with only the marks that you get in class, I feel like our entire sense of self-worth is just informed by like the kind of work that we're able to produce. And it just feels so shallow. And then see, I also know that I'm like very obsessive around my own flaws. By some unfortunate chance, I found this journal entry that I wrote a very long time ago when I was feeling unproductive. And it was so dramatic. I think, let me just find, I wrote something along the lines of, last night I bit my cheek so hard that my teeth stopped the bleeding and the rash on my shoulder stopped looking like a rash. And see, this is when I realized that this wretched story of struggle was just so much more precious to me than my own existence or my own personhood, right? What is so wrong with just existing? Yeah, even just the word just here has such a negative connotation. It's pejorative in the sense that it implies that existing is not enough. And when we come to believe that your only value comes from a tenacious and ruthless work ethic, I feel like eventually you fail to sustain it and you lose all sense of balance. And ultimately you think of it as a personal shortcoming, right? And this was the exact conversation that we had with Mithil. And I think he did a very good job of summarizing the importance of working with people.
Everyone wants to be like, I'm gonna meet them in class and have a good time, talk, learn, and everything. So I was just gonna agree with you. Like no one wakes up thinking like circuits is life and like they want to do it all day long, right? No, sorry for any electrical engineer. I don't want to like do it, but I'm just saying like specifically like that kind of stuff. You get more motivated when you see there's people there that you're gonna have fun with while learning. So like that's just what I was about to go at, but.
As an electrical engineering student myself, I completely agree with what Mithil said. I definitely don't consider circuits to be my life, even if sometimes in the middle of final season it feels like it. I think that we've, all encountered this academic elitist views of engineering and other STEM majors. And I partly think this is due to this myth that humanities and the social sciences are easy majors. But what I have been reminded taking English this semester is that there is this importance of community and discussion that I feel is almost non-existent in the typical engineering or STEM course. For engineering courses, most of the time I just, feel like a passenger waiting for a bus. The bus will leave with or without me. My being there in engineering courses almost makes no difference to the progression of the class itself. I just feel like the only one that will miss out if I'm not there is me. And I find this to not be true in English. There is more of the people aspect that when students don't come to class or don't follow the class closely enough, the discussion becomes less than what it could be. And this makes me feel like my being there matters more in English class. And, and this gives me motivation to continue to be an active participant in class.
Yeah, STEM is kind of weird that way. Like engineering is specifically innovating for people, and storytelling is so important, right? This human factor is like the cornerstone of the discipline, and yet our courses mainly just emphasize how to do the math. But besides this, I feel like a lot of us choose engineering because of our sense of social responsibility. But there's also this pressure to like hit the ground running. So to start off this conversation and kind of unpack like the expectations that we put on ourselves, we asked Mithil what his thoughts were around hustle culture.
Everyone wants to be successful, and what do all the successful people say? Don't waste your time, but they don't say how not to waste your time, right? They just say don't waste your time, but that doesn't mean like just keep on doing stuff. They don't explain that, and most people take it in a way that like you have to be doing something like 24/7, like every second of your life.
I really like how Mithil brings up the element of time, because I know that for a lot of us, we come into STEM because we feel this sense of urgency to start earning, feel as if there is a hard deadline to start a career and not a lot of time or money to experiment. But unfortunately, we walk right into a discipline that holds productivity up on a pedestal. We hear names like Elon Musk and Zuckerberg's and Bill Gates, and there's this bubble of productivity and success that constantly follows them around. And for many of us, we have come to associate hard work with success. And I think, this is bad because the equation isn't as simple as just that. It's not hard work equals success, because there are just so many different intrinsic and systemic barriers that many people face. I know my parents and many others, the struggle that they have been through. And if the relationship between hard work and success was that simple, for a multi-billionaire's worth of wealth, they must have been born one day and hustling the next, working 24 hours every day for every week for every year, right? And this spanning more than one lifetime. And this is simply just impossible.
Yeah, people benefit from privilege in our industries, right? Like if you're rich, for example, you'll have access to good education. You'll have a larger network. You'll probably get better mentorship and know of more projects to get in on. And if you're a white man, you'll be easily trusted in the industry. You wouldn't really have to work against racism or sexism to have to prove yourself in any drastic way. And see, I don't bring this up for anyone to take it personally. I understand that people that enjoy any level of success have put in effort to perfect their craft. But I think the billionaires that we look up to are a different discussion, right? And their experience isn't quite the same for everyone. So this bubble of productivity that you just mentioned, Patricia, it's especially bad for two things. First is that it keeps the working class very complacent. Like we keep thinking, oh, if I work 60 hours a week, maybe I'll get to leave the rat race. Or we just keep accepting exploitation. We don't stand up to workplace harassment, or we put our work in front of our mental and physical health. And all of this is just to get some sort of sense of accomplishment. And as a result, we see these huge burnout rates, right? But the second thing, and I think this is far more dangerous than the first, but it's when the idea of hard work is equal to success is flipped on its head and applied backwards. Like when people say, oh, you're struggling in your career, it's probably because you aren't working hard enough. Or when people think of poverty and they're apathetic and they don't understand that there are systemic ways poverty and struggle are both, reinforced through. And I think this for the longest time has been a wheel of white supremacy. Like when white supremacists say, oh, if only you worked harder, you would be more privileged, right? What does this say about our people? There's this huge myth of meritocracy, and it doesn't really do us any good. But anyway, bringing it back to engineering, I think we hold people on a pedestal, right? And if all I had to do to be successful is work longer hours and be on the grind 24/7, sure, I can wake up at 4 a.m. every day, right? I can go to class with bloodshot red eyes, but what is it doing for me? Does this work actually bring me back into my element? Will it ever get recognized? Or is it that I'm just beating myself up for not progressing at some inhumane acceleration?
Agam, what you said reminded me of this poem called Losses by Andrew Motion. And one of the lines in that poem is, my life is like a bag of flour thrown into the wind. I think it really speaks to how we as a society have sometimes so little control over our lives, because we can never take into account, all of the factors in the equation that makes up those systemic barriers. And I think it's not just external barriers. It can also be, internal expectations, our own. We live in a culture that views unproductive downtime as laziness instead of viewing it as what it is, which is, necessary. And I'm guilty of this too sometimes. And in between semesters, when everything becomes quiet and I suddenly don't really have anything to do, I feel the need to find something, just like anything at all, to get rid of the guilt, to turn off the ringing alarm in my head. And I have found that, this is not productive. I think in this episode, we've touched upon so many challenges that we face as engineering students and as fellow aspiring professionals, but these problems are not ones that we can just solve on our own. In our first year of engineering, we have had seminars discussing what is referred to as our circle of influence. A lot of the problems that Agam and I discussed in this episode are those outside of this circle, at least for now. And as students, we have to be constantly taking part in self-care. We have to be able to recognize when we get stressed and find healthy ways to deal with these situations. So to end our discussion, we asked our interviewees about the ways in which they cope with stress. And Lisa talks about how she dealt with her stress through a global pandemic, which is outside of our control. And that is also probably one of the hardest years for students everywhere.
I cry. Don't worry. I don't cry all the time. just sometimes. I'm kidding. That's so bad. But definitely, yeah, I've definitely had like breakdowns before. But I guess like in the context of like the pandemic, I guess pre-pandemic, definitely talking to my friends and like just hanging out with them was always like a nice stress reliever, because I didn't feel like I was alone. We were all like sort of going through it. That was like pretty like a good way to relieve stress. Another thing that I think I've implemented since the pandemic would definitely be like going out for walks. Right now I'm actually in like sort of my office where I like do all my schoolwork and stuff in here. And it's a very stress-inducing room. because it's just like you're supposed to work here, you know. So trying to get out for walks, get some like fresh air. Sometimes like seeing people, I guess, like walk as well with their dogs is nice. Listening to music, I think those things really help me relieve stress, especially during the school year.
And this brings us to the end of our discussion. Despite us not really having an opportunity to come together and reflect, despite all of us being more or less isolated, we really hope that this episode shows that we're still kind of in the same boat. We also hope that you choose to do things that make you happy, that you're staying safe, and that you take it easy.